You are listening to the Get Global podcast, a weekly journey into the international business landscape with leaders, knowers, and doers from around the world who share their stories and insights on the issues that matter most. Get Global brings you the best to help you thrive in foreign markets. Thank you for joining us. We have with us today Tom Doctoroff, venerable Chinese advertising and marketing expert with deep insights on Chinese culture. Tom is the Chief Cultural Insights Officer at Profit, a global brand and marketing consultancy. And previously, he had been with J. Walter Thompson since 1992, CEO of North Asia from 1998, and then CEO Asia Pacific since 2012. He recently came to the US and has had some interesting experiences here reacclimating. Tom, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me.
Tell me a little bit more about what Profit does and your time so far back in the US. How's it been for you?
Well, two very different questions. But Profit is, as you said, a global marketing and branding consulting company. And what makes them distinct is that they are fully dedicated to brands and the role that brands play in life. And we have a mission to make brands as relentlessly relevant throughout the fabric of people's lives. So that, in a nutshell, means that we not only focus on the strategy part, like the value proposition and the segmentation and the benefit clustering, but also the execution. How do you take, an idea and then make it land in market as a series of rapid rolling thunder moves that are actually implementable. So Profit is truly unique in its ability to fuse right and left brain imperatives when it comes to maximizing brand relevance.
And how long have you been back in the US now?
I arrived back in the United States at the end of 2016. Yeah, so it's been over a year now.
So how's the process been? You were in Asia for a long time, and now you're based here.
Well, the process has been, on one hand, wonderful because I'm rediscovering, despite the political times, my love for American culture and multi-dimensional, multi-ethnic vibrance and the bottom-up dynamism of, what America is. On the other hand, there is a certain sense of displacement that is inevitably a challenge when you've been part of a network, on a separate content, and you have to reintegrate yourself into, a new social framework. And that is a challenge, but one that, it has ended up being quite rewarding because you see that what you've done before, although not, directly transposed, is still relevant. And, but there's a challenge in redeploying it into an American context because Americans and the way that they view the world is fundamentally American. It's narrow. So the question of relevance, my personal brand relevance requires some incrementalism and faith in the body of my knowledge as time passes. And so far it's working out just fine.
Great. So you're seeing both sides. And this actually is a great bridge into my favorite topic with you, which is deep culture. Mm-hmm. And deep culture, we distinguish between, what normally comes up in the context of culture in the business conversation, which is oftentimes bow, kiss, or shake hands, or
how to hand over the business card.
Right, how to hand over the business card, and the significance of the number 8 in China and things like that. Whereas deep culture is understanding that this is a civilization that people are dealing with, and it has developed on its own, and has deep grooves that are entirely different from other cultures. And in order to be successful there, you need to understand at least something about that, or at least appreciate that. So I'm going to quote you from one of your recent LinkedIn articles. You said, quote, "Insights are not observations. The latter record what people say or do. The former reveal inner desire, end quote. So what is wellspring and nature of Chinese inner desire today?
Well, first, I would say that if we were to continue that quote, and I don't know if it's in that article or not, the best insights spring from conflict in the heart. Because if a brand or anything else can resolve that conflict, the role of that entity in life becomes much more valuable. So, what people like me, amateur cultural anthropologists, are always looking for are these tensions that are never fully resolved and a result of culture. And by culture, I mean an individual's relationship to society and the codes of conduct that spring from that. And cutting to the chase, China is still once and forever a Confucian culture. It is becoming more modern, it is becoming more connected, more stylish, but it is not becoming Western. And Confucian culture at the heart of it has a conflict in it. On one hand, there's high regimentation, high degree of conformity. There's something that you may have heard of called the Wulun, the five key relationships that make up all ordered society between father to son, husband to wife, older brother to younger brother, friend to friend, ruler to ruled. But without getting into a mathematical lather, suffice it to say that the individual does not exist independent of his obligations and responsibilities to other people. So that's what we normally think of as Westerners, for those who are that aware of Confucian culture, this reverence and respect for elders, filial piety, etc. But there is another dimension of Confucian culture that people rarely talk about, which explains the incredible advances of China in the past few decades. And that is incredible ambition. Uh, the desire to grab the grass ring, the desire to stand out from the pack, the desire to be acknowledged by society for your contributions to society. But it's still fundamentally different from that Western individualism because the way to advance up that hierarchy is to master convention. So the Chinese, the wellspring of their heart, and this applies to any group of Chinese that is not struggling for physical survival, is a tension between, on one hand, trenchant regimentation, but on the other hand, upward ambition. And anything that helps Chinese resolve that tension is beloved by them. Yeah. So a lot of what marketing is in China is, the translation of that master insight, if you will, into a few key fundamental principles on what works in China, what works when marketing to the Chinese people.
So what would be some applied examples of this?
Well, without sounding glib and overly simplistic, because like a Bach fugue, there are infinite variations on themes. There are three golden rules of marketing in China, right? And I'll try to go through them very quickly and give you maybe an example of each one. The first golden rule, and what I call the granddaddy of golden rules, is that in order to justify a price premium, in order to have loyalty, you have to maximize public consumption because people are only willing to pay a higher price for something that generates face for them, and establishes their status. So if you take a look, for example, of the Starbucks business model in China, it's what I've always called the Houdini Act of marketing in China because they've got 3,000 stores in all levels of cities in China, but it's a land of tea drinkers. And what have they done? They've turned it from the Howard Schultzian third space of private indulgence between home and work into a gathering site of aspirational new generation professional elite. And this covers everything from the store design to the real estate strategy, to the size of the tables, to the ratio of tables to individual plus chairs, to the pricing strategy of coffee, which is branded, which is more expensive in the United States, to food, which is unbranded, which is much less expensive than the United States. But Starbucks, its social media strategy, which is using connoisseurship of coffee culture as a way to develop social currency, but it's maximizing public consumption of the brand. And Starbucks has done very well, and all of the car brands are doing this, the super premium car brands, making it as and even IKEA, on the flip side, because people are not willing to pay a premium for goods consumed in the home, they didn't succeed until they readjusted their price value equation so that things were both aspirational and accessible. So that's what I would consider the first and most fundamental rule of marketing in China is anything that is new needs to be publicly consumed, and anything that charges a price premium needs to be dramatized by that public consumption.
What if it's aimed at the mainstream, the mid, the widest possible belt in the consumption landscape?
Well, it still applies, and I'll use that as a segue into the second key principle of marketing in China, and that is the Chinese are fundamentally pragmatic, and it is a low trust society. So brands have to be means to an end. And that means that what we call in marketing benefits, what you get out of a product, they need to be externalized. So even if you have something as simple as a soap, all right, or a shampoo or a skin cream, there's a big difference between skin that makes my hands soft and that feel good to skin he loves to touch. And when you say skin he loves to touch, that's an externalized benefit because it's also ultimately another marketing buzzword laddering up to, a strong marriage, and marriage being a fundamental, element of fitting into society and then ultimately achieving public admiration. Or if you're talking about a rural market detergent, it's not just about strong stain removal, but it's about all white stain removal that makes my little daughter look like a little swan when she's on stage performing. And then the audience is applauding my innovativeness and ingenuity as a mother. All right. So this benefit is a means to an end. It goes up and down the socioeconomic ladder, as does the importance of public consumption. But it's just a matter of how ambitious that public consumption is going to be. And the third fundamental rule is that, again, China being a non-institutionally driven, low trust society, where the clan, not the individual, is the basic unit of society, brands are for reassurance, fundamentally for reassurance. And you see this, expressing itself in very modern ways. Like if you take a look at the Chinese e-commerce scene, for example, right now, it's very different from the Western e-commerce scene. In America, for example, 22 of the top 25 sites are brand specific sites. You go to Land's End, you go to Crate and Barrel, and then you go to Bloomingdale's and you buy directly through that site. In China, e-commerce is all about reassurance through two key things. One, mega malls, Tmall, Taobao, Alibaba.com for B2B, where you have these gigantic superstructures, right, that are able to minimize counterfeit. They have the implicit support and now explicit of the Chinese central government. And the second thing about e-commerce is the way that transactional or virtual transactions have been made safe is multidimensional. And if you take a look at eBay's disastrous entry into China in the early 2000s, it's because they didn't understand this fundamental need for reassurance. First, Chinese go to the web for transactions, for infinite comparison, infinite price transparency. And again, this is all about reassurance and the reassurance of scale. So if you don't bring your brand into alignment with this basic worldview, then you take that tend to make big mistakes very quickly, and you can go down in flames.
So you started with describing Chinese culture as Confucian, where the individual is not the unit that matters, it's the group. And
I said the clan. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to call this a Japanese style collective society. I don't like the word collectivism when applied to China because collectivism is anti individual ambition. All right. China really does cherish the hero, the icon, the man on the top of the mountain. So that doesn't sound very collectivistic to me, as in the Japanese sense of taking genuine pleasure from fitting in, like eating Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
so I was going to refer also to, trust in the context of that.
Mm-hmm.
There was a book that came out, I think, 6, 7 years ago called China in 10 Characters.
Mm-hmm.
And the final character, I believe, was bamboozle.
Mm-hmm.
That this is a characteristic of contemporary Chinese society that is corrosive and cause for great concern. That you have these accidents that happen and end up poisoning large portions of the population and
That's
things
the
like
Melanie
that.
scandal. Yeah.
How does that strike the Chinese psyche and in the context of these three principles? And what does that do to Chinese brands or American brands or any foreign brand that violates that?
Well, the basic low trust nature of Chinese society, in which, by the way, resources, whether it be everything from money to social status, are very unequally distributed, is what is fueling these three rules. So everything is about generating trust. Trust is the baseline. And what I would say to answer your question in a non-redundant way is that local brands have made significant progress. Every brand from Huawei to Haier, the appliance manufacturer, even to video game manufacturers, not to mention the internet platforms, they've made tremendous progress in trust generation. And that largely comes from scale and on the ground operational resourcefulness. We're there when you need us. What they have not been able to do, right, is to elevate it into those two higher planes of um, public consumption and face generation, and clearly positioning a product that is going to make a difference on the battlefield of life. So as a means to an end. So I would say that trust is something that all Chinese companies implicitly understand is important before they can get off the launching pad. And oftentimes, international companies underestimate the importance of that and assume that they can just get by with a value added proposition. But you need both that baseline necessary but not satisfactory trust and reassurance level um, of appeal, but also in order to charge a price premium and a margin and a loyalty and generate a community, you need more than that. You need inspiration.
What do you think are some of the generational characteristics in Chinese society today? What's going on that's different with young people that's a contrast to some of the older generations or middle-aged Chinese folks that are relevant to these principles that you're discussing?
Well, this is a big question of debate. There's no question that the young Chinese are evolving, all right? But there's a confounding variable of life stage, because as soon as Chinese get married and they have the responsibility of a family, and the family is, of course, an extended family, they become much more traditional than they were before. But that said, I do think it's fair to say that the young Chinese generation, what are called the post 90s or the post 95s. They are very much more interested in experience. They're much more interested in living in the now. They're much more interested, and these are all words that an American millennial would say, as well. But the key difference between an American millennial and a Chinese millennial is that it still needs to be translated into what I call social currency. So if you go out and have a new experience, a new travel experience, you still are going to want to take a picture of that place and demonstrate your worldliness. Ultimately, Chinese, even the young millennials, view experiences as part of a toolbox of life that they can deploy as they move forward. I also think that amongst at least, the middle class, there is less of an urgency to advance than there was before. But this again is a subsegment because China, as you know, has waves of people coming online. I don't mean digitally. I mean, in terms of as consumers. But people that are in first tier cities, for example, they're much more sophisticated. They're much less needing the overt badges of success to demonstrate worldliness and a broad life experience. So something that was very interesting in a survey that we did, and it's an important survey actually called the Profit Brand Relevance Index. Pardon the commercial break, but what we did is we measured the role and the importance of brands in consumers' lives based on four attributes, or four dimensions. One is distinctive inspiration, customer obsession is the second, pervasive innovation, and ruthless pragmatism. Long story short, and we did this, by the way, in many countries, but if you take a look at tier one, two, and tier three cities, the relevance of a brand in tier one cities like Huawei, the mobile phone, which is not a Apple-like status badge, is much higher than it is in tier two and tier three cities, which shows a growing self-confidence of the new generation. It shows a generation that is not relying on passive trend education, but is starting to be a little bit more confident about China's role in the world and their role in society at trend shaping. And they're also becoming more experimental when it comes to their own identity shaping. But that's usually done digitally, not in the real world. They're still quite conservative. So,
what is it that the digital domain does for them that IRL in real life does not?
oh, it's a fundamental difference because again, China enables them. Long story short, to let out the dragon in their heart in the digital space because it's safe. So successful brands, enable people to feel like they've got a parallel identity. So whereas a selfie in the United States is going to be much more spontaneous, much more unconstructed, in China it's going to be very curated, and people are going to actually change their identity. So if you ask questions like, I feel I can be much more of my true self online than offline. In America, that difference is going to be relatively narrow. In China, that gap is going to be huge. So the internet is a blank canvas of self-expression and a release of repressed identity, to the world. And the more larger than life you can make it, the better. That's why, again, getting back to this brand relevance index, you'd be surprised. Top of five of the top 50 brands were gaming companies, Blizzard, etc., NetEase games. And the role of games everywhere for young men, okay, is emotional release. But in no other country do you have five of the top 50 brands being gaming companies when it comes to relevance, which is importance in my life. 6 of the top 10, shifting topics just a little bit, were hotel brands, premium hotel brands, whether it be the Park Hyatt or the W Hotel. And this is true in tier 1, 2, and 3 cities. So I forget the question that you were just asking. Repeat it, please. Yeah. So my point is that this generation feels different and is connected differently, but the underlying relationship that they have with society has not evolved. If you take a look at, for example, American subcultural tribalism versus Chinese subcultural tribalism, and how, say, the punks in the early 80s would permeate the rest of society, at least to a certain degree, versus the art and culture tribe. It still, say, in China, stays up on a shelf, relatively inaccessible from the masses. If you take a look at the range of popular music in China versus in the West, it's much more narrow. So the young generation is evolving, but it does not represent a culture spinning off its axis, nor does it represent a fundamental generation gap. If anything, the generation gap in China has gotten less as times have moved on.
So I'm hearing that the digital space allows them to let the dragon out of their heart, but I'm also hearing that when that happens, it's not quite so crazy as people might expect, which would, I guess, one thing I'm reading a lot about today is the algorithm and the program that the Chinese government has developed to give people social credit. So it's like social credit. It's right. Gathered by the government, gets displayed back to people, and it judges you or evaluates on multiple characteristics. Yeah. So on the one hand, you've got the people around you in your life, and when you're walking around dealing with family, friends, work, and that feels constrictive. But online, which has so much more observation, that's where people feel free.
That's where people feel free. Of course, it's not unbridled freedom because there are armies of internet censorship. But one thing that is also important is that online is not just a release. Online also, again, has to be a means to an end. Of all the countries in the world, perhaps not surprisingly, the Chinese are more willing than any other to give up their data to Big Brother. And because they view value exchange in it. So when we hear all about this multidimensional monitoring of civic responsibility and getting ratings, people are not going to rebel against that, because they're going to be able to see that might translate into benefit for me down the line. Just as membership in the Communist Party, is viewed as a tool, as a means to an end, as opposed to an ideological belief.
So the trust is, if it's got a purpose, then there can be trust. And then it reminds me, when I heard about these programs and started reading about them, and also the Edelman Trust Barometer, sort of focusing on China for a minute and exploring how much trust there is by the population in their government. But at the same time, when I look back at accidents, explosions...
Central government.
Central government.
Central government. There is, and I'm not even going to call it trust, I'm going to call it faith in the central government to forge order from chaos and to maintain the existing and evolve the existing growth model so that it is lifting all boats. Now, all boats might not be lifted at the same rate and at the same level, but the reason why Xi Jinping, despite his recent lurch towards emperor for life status, is still revered is because he is viewed as the quintessence of a central government leader who can forge order from chaos. So, sorry, I interrupted you, but there is a enduring faith, and until crisis hits, if it hits, that faith will be intact.
So if a train crashes, or
Hmm.
uh, there's some accident that reveals that there was corruption involved or something like that, that is localized as a bad apple somewhere in the local government. It's not attributed to something systemic.
No, it is systemic. It's not isolated. But I'm just saying that the respect with which the Chinese view the systems of the central government and the meritocratic and technocratic effectiveness of central government leaders is much greater than it is at the provincial and the city level. So I would not say that there is trust in the Communist Party apparatus at lower levels. But ultimately, the fact that the central government still has its hand on the till is really important, which is why very few people, are skeptical of Xi Jinping's anti-corruption crackdown because they think that the central government under his leadership has the ability to root it out, despite the fact that, of course, many people would argue that it is an attempt to root out factionalism.
So we'll come back to this in just a little bit, um, because obviously there's been so much change in the last 6 months around Xi Jinping and the 19th Party Congress. But to continue down the line of thinking around the nature of Chinese inner desire today, are there temporal characteristics, or is the society changing in any fundamental way, or is this part and parcel to the way that Chinese culture has been throughout history, and it's simply the adornment that has evolved with the time?
Um, this is the $64,000 question in which, a lot of debate can be triggered. But I believe there has been very little fundamental change to the underpinnings of Chinese society. 20 years of Barbie and Ken don't wipe out 5,000 years of Confucian society. I believe the expression of Confucian society, however, is evolving at warp speed. But for me, it's very easy to take the most modern elements of China and then put them in a Confucian context. So, for example, I don't know if you've heard of Hema supermarkets. Have you heard of them by any chance? Well, they're causing a retail revolution, a new retail revolution, in the mainland. And this is a Alibaba operated supermarket chain, which will have hundreds, if not thousands, by the end of the next year. And long story short, it is an online to offline experience, in which every product is barcoded so that every consumer can both buy it without standing in a line, which is, liberation in itself, all right? But secondly, see the provenance and the brand story and where it's come from and the ingredients, all right? And this thing is succeeding so well because it, again, both reassures in a low trust society where people don't trust where their food is coming from, but also enables people to expand the experiences that they have in terms of culinary connoisseurship, which then can, of course, be translated into social currency and faith. All right. So this still is fundamentally Chinese. And it's just a more modern manifestation of timeless Chinese imperatives. Even when you take a look at what I said earlier about the willingness or lack of willingness to pay a price premium for in home products. Well, of course, this is evolving as wealth evolves. But if you look at where people are willing to spend more money on their flooring, it's not in the kid's bedroom. It's in the living room by the front door, right? And this is where more people would tend to see it. So things have to be viewed in gray. There's no black and white when you're talking about the evolution of Chinese society, but there are centers of gravity. And this is what most marketers and non-marketers who arrive to China, who see the sweeping change, tend to disregard is the fact that things evolve. They evolve aggressively, but there is no, and I say this with no pun intended, cultural revolution happening in China today. This is not a society spinning off of its cultural axis.
I think sometime in the future, I'm going to ask you about the Cultural Revolution and what that means to Chinese memory today. But you referred to something just a moment ago about folks arriving in China and trying to eke out success there from a foreign land. Let's say that you do arrive there and you're trying to figure things out. You spent a lot of time in China. You know the place really well. But if you had to do it again, how would you develop your cultural literacy for business insight?
Oh, this is on a personal level. Um, well, I think without being arrogant, I think I happened on the right way to do it. Right? I was two things. One, I was in advertising, which is a cross category industry. So I got to look at a lot of research and a lot of insights into what's motivating people across a broad swath of experiences. And so certain trends start going up to the surface. And the second thing that I did is I became serendipitously fascinated with the Chinese language. And I had no interest in China. I had no interest in the Chinese language. But then when I started understanding the very basics of Chinese, like how people tell time and how sentences are structured, then I realized that this language is reflective of a very different worldview. You know, the advice that I give to people landing in China is, cliche as it might sound, to dive in and not be afraid of making mistakes, of asking questions, of again becoming amateur cultural anthropologists. Because as soon as people see that you are interested in them, and maybe they assume that you can at some point in the future benefit them, then their hearts open up. And then insight and just springs forth.
That's the same thing I tell folks on India. That's probably the one thing that I would say that is the thing that unites, right? There's one.
I missed the last sentence.
Oh, the curiosity, the genuine curiosity. What Indians dislike is people coming and making assumptions and operating on those in their country.
Well, I think that's true for
any culture, right?
For any culture. I think the difference between India and China is that China is a much more knowable culture, because it's much more homogenous. India is much more like a tapestry, and there's a lot more variations on the themes in India than there are in China. So my feeling is, I've been to India many, many times, and my unifying theories of India are not there yet. But I was able to develop them for China, relatively quickly, and then build on
them. And that's so you started asking people, and you started reading a lot, and you started learning the language.
Sorry for interrupting, but my formative experience, and you're probably too young to remember this, is the U.S.-led NATO bombing of the Yugoslavian embassy in 1999. And I had been there for a year. This was the reaction was apoplectic, and I was stunned, right? How everybody who had been so friendly to me, all of a sudden the lights just went out. People wouldn't look at me. And then it wasn't until 4 or 5 days later where the Chinese, again, ultimately pragmatic, started loosening up, first with the taxi drivers and then, more broadly. But then when I asked people, both Americans and Chinese, why would the Americans do something this stupid? Your embassy is not strategically important. You're not involved in the Bosnian War. And we just caused a crisis of epic proportion diplomatically. For what purpose? They said, we don't know. But it was intentional. And no American says it's intentional. They say, of course, it's accidental. Chinese will say, 真不是真不, 老百姓是老百姓. And that basically means the government is the government, the people are the people, and they exist on two separate planes. And I realized from that moment on that the relationship that people have with their society, including their government, is fundamentally different. And when the Chinese talk about democracy, they're not talking about Jeffersonian democracy, born of the Enlightenment, of the people, by the people, for the people. That's a theoretical abstraction. But they are expecting responsive democracy, responsive, which is technocratic, which is efficient, which has internal checks and balances. So it was that moment in 1999 when I first realized, walking through the consulate district in Shanghai, being yelled at by crowds of busting students, that the relationship between individual and their society is very different. Until then, I thought I was in Kansas, and I thought that people were ultimately evolving to an American high ground, to that shining city on a hill, articulated both by Ronald Reagan and the governor of Massachusetts at the beginning, Winthrop. You know, so sometimes you just got to dive right in, and you got to walk around. And by walk around, I mean that metaphorically and literally.
So, what would you tell people to go and do?
Go, go to go to the zoo. I tell them to
Go
go
to
to
the
the
zoo.
yeah. I tell them to go to the Shanghai Zoo. If you want to see mass market Chinese and how families interact, and you want to see the civility and lack thereof, go to places where the mass market is, and don't stick into the tourist places like the Bund, or nice restaurants. Get out, go into the masses, dive in, wade in, and and because the zoo is filled with people on a spring day, and then you see the competition to look at the alligators. You see, the families that are extended, not just nuclear. You see the um, beauty of people's relationships there, but also the incredible competitive nature of the society. So anytime there's a crowd, there's something to navigate.
So, what are some other theaters for this? What about nightclubs
Um,
or similar kinds of
that's
theatrical moments?
well, these different theatrical moments are really interesting. I don't want to get too personal, all right, but certain types of clubs. China exists as a major don't ask, don't tell society, all right. And if you go into a nightclub, it's party time, man. It's party time. People are bopping, all right. But then as soon as you walk out into the street, it's very different. So China has created safe spaces, all right, for people to be who they want to be, whether it's online or offline. And then they go back into the normal structure of society. But in terms of other theaters, um, any uh, Chinese restaurant, for example, you'll see it divided into two areas. One where families come together around round tables, and you'll see the dynamics of the extended family. But then around the edges, there's going to be private rooms where, again, they have round tables with very meticulously orchestrated seating structures so that face is not lost and hierarchy is reinforced, where deals are struck and faces exchanged and won and lost, and this is done in private. You will never see a deal being done at a long rectangular table, out in public, because again, this gets into trust generation. So the role of relationship between individual and society, whether it be on a family basis, whether it be on a commercial basis, you see it in the restaurant. I think young people walking through a mall, for example, of new brands, you'll be surprised that how creative they can be, but ultimately there's a conservatism to them. You take a look at a gathering of young people and their tattoos. You'll see that they're very different from the tattoos in the West. They're much more understated, but still conspicuous. So anytime that you're out there walking down Huahai Road, and then you see on one hand the incredible bonds between people who know each other and the love and the hand holding, but on the other hand, the incredible lack of sensitivity to somebody that you don't know's personal space, you see the real China. So you just dive in.
So, what do you make of the theater of Singles Day? I think that that's something that's come into the West, is this utter fascination that sales can be racked up that way in a single day. Um,
Well, Singles Day, as you know, started off as a retail therapy for the lovelorn, because it's 1111, and has since morphed into a global declaration of national economic strength. So when people are buying on Singles Day, all right, they are making a contribution to Chinese society by saying, we are strong economically and we are going to beat last year's record. So it is an incredibly nationalistic day. And the young people, all right, are very nationalistic. And they are very nationalistic because they, again, have ambitions in their heart, but because they exist in a still old world where the social structures that are underlying have not evolved, they look for anything, right, to project their own identities onto. And the nation is, of course, number one. So Singles Day is net net a nationalistic spending orgy, demonstrating strength.
so they've got all kinds of options for where to put that. Um,
Not really, relatively few.
well, no shortage of places for them to spend their money on that day, right?
Oh, okay.
I guess that's what I meant. Is uh, so they want to express national strength, economic strength, vibrancy, and it's Singles
But
Day after all. What is
but
the flavor of
but
that?
but also it's a party. The flavor is a party. It's a buying party because again, it's lifestyle liberation. It's not just unidimensional. I mean, this is where you can buy things cheaply. Okay, you can establish social currency for the haul that you've made. And if you take a look at how Alibaba, excuse me, uh, yeah, Alibaba handles Singles Day, it's a televised event right now, with celebrities coming in. And the celebrities, by the way, are both international and local, whether it be Beckham or Scarlett Johansson, or Tong Wei, you know. So it's a happy party. It's what I call reassurance 2.0. It's a way of saying, projecting pride of the nation, making yourself feel more confident in the future of the nation, through the scale of this mega event, but it's happy and it's self-expressive, And by the way, in marketing, it's always good to combine two unexpected dynamics because that's what creates uniqueness. But now I get into marketing theory.
What would be an example of that?
Of what exactly?
The unexpected, two unexpected combinations of things.
Um, well, just for example, a diamond, right? A diamond, women buy their own diamonds in China. And I'm not talking about wedding diamonds, which are popular too. In fact, it's a new cultural imperative. But a diamond both sparkles, which is very conspicuous, but it's also understated. It doesn't shine like old fashioned gold. So diamonds, which are both understated and conspicuous, are very appreciated in China. It's the same thing for the Mont Blanc 5.6 point star. The mere act of putting a pen in your pocket, on one hand, is an understated gesture of refinement, but on the other hand, it's a power gesture. And so even when you're talking about um, SK2, all right, SK2, which is a leading Asian, sponsored by P&G, cosmetic, has natural ingredient, so that natural ingredient can give you the confidence to be who you are, so you can go out and conquer the world and change destiny. So this natural from within coming to outside demonstration of confidence and success, these things align very easily in a society that is unified, as we spoke at the beginning, by this Confucian culture between regimentation and ambition, projection of status, and protection of economic and uh, social interests.
So you've mentioned reassurance as a critical piece in marketing in China. So do American brands or even foreign brands have the upper hand in reassuring that something is going to be safe?
Yes,
Is that still the case?
yes, but what they're missing, because they just have reputation, but they're missing the scale. So Chinese reassure by scale. Westerners reassure by clear value added and innovation, as a rule.
Right. So food would be something really important, and um, makeup, anything that touches the body. These would all be ripe areas for expressing trust in that way. What would be the expression of scale in that context? Just that everyone is using it, and that would be
Well, see, that's the challenge of Western marketers, is that particularly as it gets close to the face and the body, um, Western marketers can reassure that it's safe. That's why baby powder charges 300% price premium. But very few Western marketers have generated the on the ground scale through partnership or through operational flexibility, through the wrong balance of, or the right balance of central headquarter control and local autonomy. So there's this big white space in China where the majority of the local brands are operating based on reassurance, which is scale rooted. The international brands are operating with reassurance, but based on trust that the company is a good company and the products are not going to be corrupt.
what do you think it's going to take to have the foreign brand with scale? Do you think that there's anyone doing that right that could be a model to others right now?
Hmm. Oh, in the auto sector, Volkswagen is doing a good job, and they started early. I would say, Procter and Gamble is slowing down, but still, it achieved partnerships in terms of distribution. The answer is going to be Starbucks is doing it very well. The answer comes in partnership and trust, because Starbucks is not operated directly. It's got partnership with a Taiwanese fast food company. Two of them. One might be from Hong Kong. Sorry, I can't be clear on that. But it's a question of trust between two entities that come together in China in talk. You cannot negotiate partnership from Battle Creek, Michigan.
Hmm. So switching gears a little bit, we were talking about in the Yugoslavian example, relating the people to the government. Been a lot of change at the top recently with the
Mm-hmm.
19th Party Congress. Xi Jinping basically wrote himself into the constitution, which had only been twice before. Mao Zedong and then Deng Xiaoping. And with Deng Xiaoping, it hadn't even happened until he was dead. So what can you make of recent developments, not only with the 19th Party Congress, but with the recent development of near emperor for life, if he wants that?
Well, I'm quite distressed by it, actually, because I think it reveals a fundamental insecurity in the future. I think that China views itself at a perilous moment in history. Here comes the ultimate China cliche: crisis is both opportunity and danger. Um, but I think they see an American nation that is abdicating its leadership role. They see that as an opportunity. I think they see themselves making relentless progress up the price value chain and then exporting their products into emerging markets around the world. I think that they see finally that people are proud of China's resurgence and are very eager to stand up on the global stage. So there's all of that optimism, but underlying it, there's a sense that the system has not evolved, and there's a lot of precariousness due to the tensions in society that are multidimensional between rich and poor, traditionalists and non-traditionalists, urban and rural, et cetera, not to mention the factionalism. And so I think that they view the structure of the Chinese economy as still relatively rigid. And Xi Jinping, I think, is taking advantage of both the optimism and the anxiety that exists today. And he will own whatever comes of it. But no matter what, in any society, authoritarian or democratic, institutions are key. And Xi's power grab is fundamentally anti institutional. It's driven more by a cult of personality, and that is a dangerous thing. If not tomorrow, then 8 years from tomorrow.
How do you think that's going to affect the national psyche? I'm sure that you're reading newspaper articles and watching reactions in the Chinese internet. How are people taking this, and what can you make of these reactions?
Well, I haven't. I go back to China about once every month, so I haven't done my on the ground focus groups or one on ones about this with the people yet. But my my guess is people don't care, because things are going pretty okay right now, and I think that, as we mentioned earlier, people have credited Xi for imposing more order. Um, I think also when it comes to the censorship, uh, people don't care about that much either because they're not so much fundamentally interested in talking about politics on the internet. So my feeling is people won't care until things get rocky, if they get rocky. And then you could have a swing from the front foot to the back foot. So when insecurity reigns, people dig in their heels. And then if it's really insecure, chaos erupts. So this gets back into your cultural revolution question. The cultural revolution was massive disorientation, and what was good before was bad. Anything that was traditional Chinese before was good, whether it be scholarship, respect for father over emperor, sloping roofs, Chinese pagodas. They became bad, all right? And as a result, the entire society was spun off, in this case, its axis, and then chaos erupted, and people didn't know how to handle it. So people need structure. People need predictability. And until that predictability and that structure is fundamentally shaken in ways that people can feel in the lives for themselves and their family, you're not going to get much hot air.
Hmm. So I think we've touched most of the things that you write about on LinkedIn, and
I'm sure maybe not all, but
well, our favorite things to watch, maybe, except for one, the state of marketing and advertising today, what's going on with the industry, what's going on with agencies. What's your sense now that you've been back since 2016? I know that you've got some strong feelings about marketing and advertising today, and especially
I think two things have happened. Okay, one, but neither of them good, and so the marketing is in somewhat of a pre-existential state, and I hope it doesn't get to the existential state. But one is that there has been a swing towards what is called performance marketing, and performance marketing is basically a programmatic where you target individuals because of their cookies and their history, and then you give them a very specific message and an offer. All right. And marketers have swung their dollars into those digital areas. And that has been very destructive for what we call long-term equity building or loyalty generation. It's not a high margin game. The second thing that's happened is that the holding companies have been very slow to evolve their structures. In fact, the way that the holding companies, in my opinion, are evolving is not constructive, because what they're creating are more silos. And what marketers hope for but are not getting from the holding companies is the deconstruction of silos, regardless of whether those silos are skill specific, say advertising versus platform build, or client specific, because that's sort of like a horizontal silo, like when WPP creates its own agencies for specific clients. And so the value of holding companies has not been demonstrated to clients for some time right now. When you add on top of that the lack of transparency in media and rebates, clients are demanding better, and then there are the trends of disintermediation where a lot is being moved in house for clients. So the advertising industry is not going away. The holding companies are not going away. But I do think that there needs to be a fundamental reordering of and redeployment of assets across silos, not within silos. And that has not yet begun. So we're going to be going through several more years of pain.
So how do you see, so brands themselves are reacting by taking some of these things in-house, or at least trying to. What do you think is that must be difficult for them?
It is difficult. It is difficult because what can be brought in house are only operational things. I mean, the gist and the thrust of what brands are highly abstract things. The brands with a purpose, and that purpose manifests itself across all different touch points and experience. This is something that, of course, the companies can be responsible in certain areas or domains, but ultimately, people who go into marketing are different than people who go into communication, right? What they get excited about and what their passion points are different. But ultimately, the brand is a very valuable commodity because it equals loyalty and it equals price premium and margin. So nobody is going to be happening just going down the path towards commoditization. But there's going to be a reordering of the world, and no one can say what that reordering is going to look like. Well, I would like to see it, and this is coming from a advertising guy who still has respect for the conceptual craftsmanship of brands and advertising people. Although now you're not allowed to call yourself an advertising person. I have to say that I'm an engineer of media neutral, idea centric participation platforms. But what I would like to see is I would like to see clustering of different types of companies who, through a flexible P&L structure, are more easy to work together. I would like to see the cowboys and the farmers incentivized both through location and P&L flexibility to share resources. And getting back to profit, frankly, that's why I joined the company, is because there's one P&L, and then we don't have any disincentive for the people who do creative output to be working with the people who do strategic output. And that makes a world of difference. And that needs to happen on a holding company level, where all of the different companies or assets that they have are, significantly rearranged and reclustered. What you've got going on right now, as I said before, in any of the holding companies, is a consolidation for cost saving within these silos or within these skill sets. And that's the road to perdition.
Final question, though, about cowboys and farmers. To the uninitiated, who are the cowboys and who are the farmers?
Oh my God. The cowboys are the people that you might call traditionalists. The farmers are the ones that are people that you might call traditionalists, but ones that I believe, have a faith or a belief in the timeless elements of brand building. The cowboys are the systematic thinkers, the platform builders, the people that are capable of opening up new ways of engaging with consumers to facilitate or lubricate transactional immediacy. And both of these people are important. But what's really critical is that they get aligned so that the purpose is being reinforced by the transaction, or the one-on-one relationship, which is facilitated by digital technology, is deepening the relationship with the brand over time, as defined by a long-term brand purpose, which is a long-term relationship between consumer and brand that, again, expands over time.
Well, this podcast has gone about twice as long as we normally try to go, but it's always such a delight to talk to you, and always so interesting. Tom, thank you so much for making time for us, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. Aim to have you in the near future again.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to find out more about our events and get more global intel every week, sign up for our newsletter at getglobal.co.